The rain comes in sheets, slamming against the palace roofs, hammering the gutters until they overflow in twisting streams that vanish into the blackness below. The stone walls sweat in the heat of the storm, and the corridors are slick with the breath of too many bodies pressed together, moving quickly, speaking in whispers that die before they reach the walls. Somewhere in the east wing, a single bell tolls, small, hesitant, the kind meant to herald a birth, though the sound feels more like a warning. You walk toward it. The air thickens with every step, heavy with the scent of damp stone and iron, a sweetness lurking beneath that does not belong. Candlelight flutters along the corridor, but the shadows cling, pooling in corners where the light will not go. They pass you in quick succession. The midwives, their hands slick, their faces drawn tight, eyes fixed on the floor as though the weight of what they have seen will crush them if they dare to look up. One carries a bundle of linens that drip dark onto the flagstones. Another moves as if she has forgotten how to breathe. The door stands half open. Inside, the chamber is sealed against the storm, curtains drawn so thick the air does not move. A copper basin crouches in the corner, water clouded and red. The bed dominates the room. Sheets tangled, pillows askew. The queen's body arched in exhaustion. Her lips are pale, her breath shallow. Her hands clawing at the linen as though holding on to something slipping away. A sound rises, small, fragile, a newborn's first cry. It hangs in the air for a heartbeat, and then it is gone, cut off so sharply that the silence it leaves behind feels heavier than the storm outside. The midwives freeze. One steps back from the bed, her hands trembling. She stares at the queen's fingers, and you follow her gaze. The nails have darkened in the candlelight, a deep, unnatural hue. The skin along the base is blistering, pulling back to reveal raw flesh beneath. The rot is not creeping. It is blooming. You do not yet know what this means, only that something has entered this room that will not be driven out. By the time spring comes, the eastern wing will be closed in lead, its windows sealed, its doors bricked over, and the queen's name will vanish from the royal record, as though she had never lived at all. By dawn, the storm has passed, but the air inside the palace hangs heavy, stale, and close. The official messengers move quickly through the streets, their voices carrying the same line. The queen has delivered safely, the child is strong, the bloodline secure. It is the tale the court needs them to hear, and so it is told with smiling lips and polished words. But behind the sealed curtains of the eastern wing, the truth festers. The bedclothes from the night are dragged into the courtyard, heaped high, and doused in oil before a torch is set to them. The flames bite fast, climbing high into the gray morning sky, but even the smoke carries a strange sweetness that clings to the skin. Midwives move like shadows, avoiding each other's eyes, their arms buried to the elbow in steaming basins as they scour their hands until the skin splits. The guards at the chamber doors do not stand at attention. They lean away from the threshold, as though the air leaking through the cracks might be poisonous. They speak in low murmurs about the smell, about the wet sound that comes from inside when the queen shifts in her bed. One swears he heard the cry of the newborn again in the night, though no child rests in the cradle by the window. In the palace's private rooms, the physician writes in quick, cramped script. He notes the queen's fever, the pale yellow of her eyes, the streaks of red that pulse beneath her skin as if something moves inside. He writes the word puerperal, the term of the time for the dangerous fevers that claim mothers in the hours after childbirth. He speaks to the Archbishop of miasma, of air gone bad from damp walls and human waste, the way it seeps into the lungs and carries sickness from one body to the next. But even as he explains, his gaze slides toward the door, and his voice falters. The servants have their own theory. They whisper in the scullery that the child was born without the blessing of bone, that the soft thing the queen labored over was not meant to live. They say it was swaddled in black cloth instead of white, that the midwife crossed herself not once but 3 times before touching it, and that the bundle was carried away to the kitchen hearth before the first hour after midnight had passed. By the end of the second day, no one enters the queen's chamber unless ordered. The fires burn constantly, smoke curling through the corridors in a bid to mask the other smell that will not fade. Somewhere in the bowels of the palace, a bundle of rags still smolders, giving off a bitter, acrid scent that seeps into the stone itself. If you're watching this from somewhere with its own strange birth legends, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Let's see how far these echoes travel. By the third day, the air in the eastern wing has taken on a life of its own. It creeps into the corridors, slow and clinging, seeping beneath doors and into the folds of clothing. The servants describe it in different ways. Some say it is like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. Others say it is copper on the tongue, but all agree it turns the stomach. The smell is not constant. It comes in waves, as though something inside the chamber exhales and then waits. One by one, the heavier pieces of furniture are carried out. The carved walnut chest that once held her linens, the high-backed chair where she had taken her evening meals, the low table stacked with letters and perfumed paper gone. The legs of each piece are wrapped in cloth before they are touched, and the porters burn the wrappings when their work is done. The room grows emptier, more like a cell than a queen's chamber. The windows are covered in layers of thick black cloth, nailed into the wooden frames. It is not to keep mourners away, for there are no mourners here, nor to hide her from the public, for the public is not allowed within these walls. It is to deny the room the touch of light. In these times, healers believed that darkness slowed the corruption of the humors, that it kept the blood from boiling and the mind from unraveling. The shadows in the room grow thick and restless, wrapping themselves around the bedposts, swallowing the pale outline of her form beneath the sheets. It is on this day that the first refusal is recorded. Brother Armand, a monk of the abbey who has served the palace for 20 years, is called to administer the sacrament. He steps into the chamber, takes one breath, and stops. Later, when pressed, he claims her breath carried the taste of the grave. That to stand within reach of her was like leaning over an open tomb. He turns away from the bed without offering the blessing, murmurs a prayer for his own soul, and walks out. He does not return. Outside, the guards are ordered to keep the doors shut at all times. Inside, the air grows heavier still. Somewhere beyond those blackened windows, the city moves on, unaware that within the heart of its palace, a slow and silent undoing has begun. If you want more hidden stories like this, subscribe to Cursed Chronicles. These are the tales you were never meant to hear. By the fourth day, the sickness in the queen's chamber has begun to spill into the heart of the court, not as an infection of the flesh, but as a fracture in loyalty. Letters move in secret between dukes, their seals broken and read by eyes they were never meant for. In the candlelit corners of the great hall, words are spoken in voices too low to carry, yet their meaning seeps into every corridor. The regency must shift, for the throne cannot be left in hands that are bound to a bed. In the cathedral library, the church elders gather beneath painted saints and speak of omens. They warn that the queen's suffering is no mere affliction, but a mark, divine judgment upon a crown that has strayed from its vows. They recall ancient sermons, stories of rulers who sealed pacts in shadows and paid with their bloodline. Some believe the child was never meant to live. Others insist it should never have been born at all. In the physician's quarters, the talk is different. He has no word for what he sees, but centuries later it will be named necrotizing fasciitis, a sickness that devours flesh as if it were a living thing. He tells his apprentices it is an infection of rare cruelty, a rot that does not wait for death to claim its host. Yet even in his certainty, there is fear. For no cause he knows could make the changes spread so quickly, nor make the skin blacken while the eyes still follow the light. The eastern wing is closed to all but a chosen few. The great doors, once polished for state occasions, now stand as barriers. No trays of food pass through, only jugs of vinegar and tightly wrapped bundles of fresh cloth left on a low stool just inside the threshold. The servants who bring them step no further, and they keep their heads bowed as they retreat, as though afraid to be remembered by whatever lies beyond. One evening, a maid is sent inside to change the bedclothes. She is gone for less than an hour, and when she returns, she does not speak. Her hands tremble as she pours water for the guards, her eyes fixed on nothing. When questioned, she opens her mouth but no sound comes. By nightfall she has left the palace entirely. In the weeks to come, it will be said that she took her silence to the grave, though not before making the sign of the cross every time the palace was mentioned. By the end of the first week, the queen's condition is no longer a secret to those who live in the shadow of the palace walls. In the narrow streets beyond the gates, neighbors speak of the way the dogs howl through the night, their voices drawn out and mournful, as if answering some call no one else can hear. Stable hands whisper that the palace horses refuse to eat when kept near the eastern side, their eyes rolling white, hooves scraping at the ground as though to claw their way free. In the marketplace, stories grow faster than the stalls can open. A butcher's wife claims her brother, a night guard on the outer wall, heard a sound like wet cloth tearing, followed by the sharp, short scream of a woman. A brewer swears he saw pale hands at the blackened windows, though no one else in the tavern will confirm it. One morning, a letter is intercepted by the chancellor's men, a private correspondence from a visiting envoy bound for Burgundy. Its ink is rushed, the lines uneven, as though written in haste. The envoy speaks of being led, under bribe and secrecy, to a narrow gap in the queen's chamber door. Through it, he claims to have seen her lying still, her eyes half shut, her skin stretched thin over her cheekbones. But what froze him was not her stillness. It was the motion beneath it. He writes, "Her face moved without her. The skin shifted as though something beneath it were pulling at her muscles, tracing its own shape." Such tales find their echoes in older chronicles. In the court of Aragon, a duchess was said to have wasted away under an illness that made the veins rise and twist like the roots of a tree. In Prague, a countess confined to her rooms was reported to bleed from the eyes and ears for 100 days, yet never lose her breath until the moment her body was burned. In both cases, the records end suddenly, as if the final truth was too dangerous to keep in ink. Now, whispers carry through the streets that the queen's name will soon vanish from the rolls of the living, whether or not she still breathes. No one outside the palace dares to say why aloud. Where are you watching from? Comment below. Your country might have its own version of this story. They come in silence, long after the rest of the palace has gone to ground. Their steps are soft on the worn flagstones, their faces hidden in the deep folds of hoods. The priests carry no torches, only small brass lanterns with their flames shuttered, so the light spills in narrow, trembling lines across the walls. In their arms, they bear a painted icon, the face of a saint whose eyes are wide and unblinking, the mouth frozen in an expression somewhere between mercy and warning. They enter the queen's chamber without a word. The air inside is damp and close, heavy with the mingling scents of vinegar, decay, and the faint, metallic tang that lingers after blood has dried. They lift the icon carefully and hang it from the canopy above her bed, the painted gaze fixed directly on her face. The queen does not stir. The chanting begins as a low murmur, the voices weaving together in a rhythm older than the crown itself. Night after night, they return, their prayers deepening into a constant, almost physical pressure in the air. They draw symbols in ash on the floor, their shapes curling into one another like binding knots. For 3 nights, the sound never truly stops, rolling in waves that rise and fall, as if the entire wing of the palace has been set adrift on some slow, mournful tide. On the 4th night, something changes. A wind moves through the sealed room, bending the flames of the lanterns though no window is open. The icon trembles against its chain. Without warning, it falls, striking the bed with a sound too loud for its weight. At that exact moment, a scream tears down the corridor, sharp enough to pierce the chanting. The voices stop. No one breathes. When the morning comes, the chamber is quiet. The sheets beneath the queen are soaked through, though no one can say with what. Her mouth is slack, and where once there were teeth, there is only an empty, blackened gum line. The missing teeth are not lost. They are laid out in a perfect circle on the damp linen beside her, each one still smeared with the shadow of dried blood. Years later, physicians will suggest that severe infection and malnutrition can loosen teeth, making them fall without force. But no medical scroll, then or now, can explain how they came to rest in such deliberate order, as though placed by hands that wanted to leave a message. If this is the first time you've heard of the ritual of the living dead, subscribe. Curse Chronicles is just getting started. The days that follow strip away whatever humanity the queen's body still held. Her skin no longer breaks in small, scattered patches. It comes away in curling sheets, leaving the pale sinew beneath glistening in the low lamplight. The smell sharpens, sour and metallic, clinging to the robes of anyone who lingers too long in the room. Along her thighs and ribs, something new begins to push through the exposed flesh. Thin, white strands twisting outward, curling and branching like the roots of a tree growing in darkness. The monks speak of them in whispers, calling them the fingers of the earth, though the physician insists they are some strange form of decayed tissue, unlike anything he has ever seen. Late into the night, the physician writes by the thin light of a single candle. His tract is not meant for the court, nor the church, but for those who might one day face this same horror. In his hurried script, he describes what he has seen in detail that borders on blasphemy. Her tissue decomposes while the breath remains. The body rots as though buried, yet the eyes still follow movement, and the lips shape words without sound. He documents the way the tendrils withdraw and extend, the way the wounds weep a dark fluid that thickens as the hours pass. But when his notes reach the hands of the archbishop, they are taken from him before they can be bound. The church declares the writings dangerous, not for the knowledge they contain, but for the contagion they might spread through the mind. Words carry sickness, the archbishop says, and sickness of the soul is worse than rot of the flesh. The manuscript is thrown into the fire before the physician's eyes, the flames swallowing his weeks of careful observation in moments. 2 nights later, the physician wakes to a sound outside his door. There is no knock, only the faint scrape of wood against stone. When he opens it, the corridor is empty, but at his feet sits an unmarked box, small enough to carry in one hand. Inside, folded with a precision that makes his breath catch, lies a single swaddling cloth. The fabric is stiff, hardened into unnatural shapes by a crusted black fluid that has seeped through every layer. The smell is sharp, acrid, and unmistakable. He closes the lid, but the scent clings to his hands long after he has thrown the box into the fire. CTA if you want more hidden accounts like this, events that were meant to be erased from history. Subscribe to Curse Chronicles so these stories are never buried again. The council meets in the small hall, its stone walls closing in like a crypt. No trumpets announce the gathering, no scribes sit ready to record it. This is a meeting meant to vanish as soon as it ends. The men around the table avoid one another's eyes, their voices low, each weighing the same impossible choice: to declare the queen dead and free the throne, or to maintain the illusion that she still rules from behind her blackened curtains. Some speak of mercy. Mercy for a woman who has not seen the sun in weeks, who lies in darkness surrounded by the smell of her own decay. Others speak of necessity, that the kingdom cannot endure a sovereign whose name is whispered only in fear. A few argue for silence, for leaving things as they are until nature, or something far darker, resolves the matter. The door opens and 2 messengers enter, their travel-stained robes marked with the seal of the papal court. They deliver their warning in measured tones. If the curse is confirmed, the queen's body must never be laid in consecrated soil. She will be denied the royal crypt, denied prayers, denied rest in the eyes of the church. Her remains, they say, must be destroyed so thoroughly that not even ash remains to bear her name. Outside her chamber, the guards stand their shifts in silence, but cracks begin to show. One is found in the night, crouched in the corner, his eyes wide and unfocused, muttering that the walls are moving in and out as if they were breathing. Another swears he heard soft footsteps pacing behind the door, though none had entered in days. They are replaced, but the replacements fare no better. By the week's end, the decision is closer than ever, but no voice is willing to speak it aloud. For as long as the queen still draws breath, however faint, there is a part of them that fears the consequences of declaring her gone. And so they wait, caught between duty, faith, and the dread of what waits behind the sealed door. If you believe history hides more than it tells, subscribe to Curse Chronicles, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. For men are chosen, not for their loyalty, for that is assumed, but for their silence. They are stripped of their court attire and bound in layers of linen, their hands and faces wrapped until only their eyes remain uncovered. Each carries an incense burner, the thin trails of smoke curling ahead of them as they approach the eastern wing. The doors, swollen with damp and age, are unbarred, and the smell that escapes is so dense it seems to cling to the air itself. Inside, the room is unrecognizable. The air is heavy, still, and wet. The mattress where the queen has lain for weeks has given way entirely, the straw and fabric reduced to a dark sludge that oozes into the cracks of the floor. She lies sunken into it, her body twisted at an unnatural angle, one thigh split open along its length. The wound is rimmed with cracks that branch outward like the bark of a dead tree, the skin dry and brittle where the rest of her still weeps with moisture. In the far corner they see it, a small bundle, stiff with age and blackened at the edges. It is the swaddling cloth, recognizable by the embroidery along its seam, that all had believed was burned on the night of the birth. The fabric is hard as wood, its folds sealed together by layers of dried, dark fluid. None will touch it, but its presence sends a ripple through the four men, as though some unspoken truth has been confirmed. One of the monks steps forward to speak the final prayers. His voice is steady for the first lines, but as he kneels, it falters. His eyes roll back before the final blessing leaves his lips, and he collapses to the floor. They carry him out, his limbs limp, his breath shallow. In the years that follow, he will never speak again. The remaining three return to the council without ceremony. They speak in low tones, each one describing only what he must. By the time the meeting ends, the decision is sealed, not with signatures but with silence. No proclamation is made. No record is written. The next entries in the royal ledger will leap ahead in time, skipping these weeks entirely, as if they never existed. Somewhere deep in the palace archives, the pages that should hold the truth remain blank. Not torn out, not marked over, simply left empty, so that even the shape of the absence cannot be read. If you want more stories that were meant to be erased, subscribe to Chronicles, and make sure these shadows are never allowed to fade. By spring, the eastern wing stands silent. The windows are gone, bricked over and hidden beneath layers of fresh plaster. The doors are sealed in lead, their outlines nearly erased by the stonework, as if the palace itself is trying to forget what it once held. The corridors that once led there are blocked by heavy tapestries, their fabric thick enough to muffle the memory of footsteps. Outside, the gardens grow wild along that side of the wall, vines climbing over masonry that no gardener will touch. Her name has vanished from the rolls of court, stripped from proclamations, omitted from the prayers offered at Massachusetts. The paintings that bore her likeness have been quietly removed. In their place hang hunting scenes, pastoral landscapes, anything that does not invite remembrance. To speak her name now is to invite silence, as though the sound itself might carry whatever claimed her. Yet the memory endures, in whispers, in hidden letters, in the accounts of those who stood too close to her bed and carried the scent away on their skin. They tell of a decay that lived, of flesh that rotted while the eyes still followed the light. In the medieval world, such a thing sat on the knife's edge between medicine and curse. To the physician, it was the most vicious form of infection, a thing that could strip a body bare before its time. To the priest, it was proof of divine retribution, a mark against the soul rather than the skin. And to the people, it was something older still, something that moved through bloodlines and shadows, choosing its victims without reason. The truth is buried now, sealed behind stone and silence. Was she a victim of the age's cruel diseases, a casualty of childbirth and the fevers that followed? Or did something darker touch the royal bloodline, something that no amount of vinegar, prayer, or fire could drive away? Subscribe to Chronicles so these stories aren't sealed away again, and drop a comment with where you're watching from so we know how far her story travels.